Ladies and gentlemen, I hope everyone is back now from enjoying um, the scrumptious lunch that we just had from the Frasers. It was very nice, well prepared. I really and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, in our program for the day, which is still Eastern Cape Film Festival, we now moving to session 3, whereby we're gonna get Mr. Siyabulela Lazarus from the DEAT to actually handle this session. So all the nitty-gritties we're gonna hear from him. I thank you.
Right. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Siyabulela Lazarus from the Department of Economic Development, Environmental Affairs and Tourism. DTIT. I'm from the sub-program Economic Development. So I'll be your facilitator for this third session. Hopefully it's not a graveyard shift, as it is widely known as such, after lunch. But I think we are getting to the exciting part of the program, which really deals with support, more especially around funding, issues of access to funding, content development, skilling. So the first part of our session, we are going to invite Mr. Stephen Pillay from Spray Studios, who will outline the processes around sourcing content and upskilling local emerging producers. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I asked for a beer to, like a black label. No, I'm kidding. There is no beer. There's no presentation either. It's just me and you. Thank you, and I know it's the post-lunch session, so we'll, like Mr. Lazarus' name, we'll try and get you to rise. Okay? We're going to talk about content sourcing. I was here last year, and we had a lot of success last year being part of this festival in terms of talking to young and emerging producers and creators, and then continuing that engagement for the rest of the year in terms of picking up their content. And we found that attending markets like these are quite important for the industry because there's a massive gap in knowledge. There's a massive gap in knowledge, not just in terms of how to prepare content, but in how to go about doing the business of content. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about that because there's massive challenges to the industry in general. We can kind of talk about things myopically, but there's a lot of economics in the world and in South Africa currently that are impacting our particular sector. So it needs all the stakeholders, soft funding, whether you're talking to broadcasters or streamers or advertisers, kind of everybody to play their part in trying to make this work. And generally when you're studying and when people sort of get into the world of filmmaking for the first time, you think of very traditional funding models and very traditional ways of making content. If you think of TV, you think of TV as a very straight and linear thing package. You think of a movie and documentaries. But there's a whole world out there in digital that is evolved and surpassed TV in many, many ways in terms of its captive audience. And even in the conversations I've had in the last week, I haven't encountered too many conversations where people are focused on digital because there's so much funding available for it and so much access. Or is that the Microsoft Teams? That's probably Nigel just dialing in now. No, it isn't. Just checking. So there's many challenges. Our focus from a Trade Studios point of view is that we create, produce, and we distribute content. And I'll start with the latter. The distribution part of content is one of the most important areas because it's the key determining factor to what is going to be sourced and what is going to be produced. So if you don't understand the distribution side, it's very difficult to understand what to make and how to make it. And distribution is kind of the teeth of the industry because when you're distributing content, you end up in incredible conversations with different platforms about co-productions, co-developments, pre-sales. Those words sometimes seem foreign to young filmmakers or new filmmakers, but to to experienced filmmakers, that's kind of the model that is the present model around the world. So we'll unpack a little bit about that and how to start thinking about your content. And the first part of it is understanding what people want. Somebody mentioned it earlier, I think it was NAVF. You've got to keep asking, what do people want? What do audiences want? And what do broadcasters or streamers or platforms want? What are people watching? And it takes an incredible amount of research, and that's what we spend a large amount of our time doing, is understanding audiences, not just in South Africa, but across Africa. Trace's objective is kind of focused at the African diaspora around the world, not just South Africa. So we can see the differences and variations from the Caribbean to Cote d'Ivoire to Cameroon to Niger to Kenya to Southern Africa to Mauritius. But we can also see the similarities in terms of storytelling and the kind of things that are working, and paying less attention to the type of medium, whether it's scripted, unscripted, animation, or docu or factual. Kind of focus on what is the emotional narrative under there. Can it relate to people in other parts of the world? If we had to dub this show, if we had to subtitle the show, can it translate with audiences around the world? Can it tell the African story? And will other people who are like us want to watch it? That's really the key thing. It's Africa's biggest challenge, and it's our continent's biggest challenge, is we want to be a big player in the world, but we have to learn to package our stories and tell our stories in a way that people who are not like us can watch too. Because then we have mass audiences, and that's kind of what the distribution game is about. So we are open for those dialogues. When we're acquiring content for our distribution team to take out to the world, there's very little curation. There's some curation on quality because there's certain quality standards needed. And the better the quality, the more platforms you can sell it to. But we're not really curating it to tell you whether your story is a good story or not a good story, or if it's the best story in the world or not. It matters less. The fact that you've made something, whether it's a movie, whether it's a short format or short biopic, whether it's a music documentary, whether it's an unscripted show, that's the important thing. If you've completed it, it is important because it means we can sell it to somebody. And remember, it may not be Netflix that buys it, but it might be a broadcaster in Cote d'Ivoire who's willing to buy a French version of that thing. And they're not going to pay $100,000 for a movie, but they'll pay $2,000 for a movie. But $2,000 is more than that filmmaker today has. Right? Exactly. So that's kind of the model we're looking at. And right now we represent a large amount of content, especially from Nigeria and Kenya, and the French-speaking African to a Francophone Africa. I'll give you an idea where we sell the content to, so you'll understand what our MO is here. Our content goes out to streamers around the world. It goes out to free-to-air broadcasters around the world. It goes out to pay TV broadcasters, cable, and what many people don't know the word fast channels, but we put content onto fast channels as well. Fast channels are something that's coming up. You've heard a lot about streaming and on-demand and video demand and OTT. Fast channels are kind of linear TV in a way repackaged. It's advertiser-driven linear TV, which means it's very thematic. So you could have a property channel, and it has just hundreds of hours or thousands of hours of property shows repeated on there, but all the property advertisers kind of focus their money on those channels because they have a captive audience. For content makers, historically, that made no money. In 2023, that makes a huge amount of money. So you've got platforms like Otera and Pluto who are having great success with these things. So, I can give you examples of one particular distributor who told us that he was doing this 8 years ago. And he was focused on the property market and doing shows around property and lifestyle. And he said, you got to try these fast channels and give us content for fast channels. And everybody laughed at him and said, well, it doesn't make any money. 8 years later, he bills around $200,000 a month only on his top 10 titles on fast. So that's incredible. 70% of the revenue goes back to the content owner, the content producer. So that's incredible revenue. But I mean, that's an extreme end of the success story. So that's what we're kind of trying to do, is we're getting into these markets. The other market we sell our content into other airlines. Trace distributes its content into about 20 international airlines, which means people sitting on those flights can access African content directly. And what we're looking to put there is not just the high-end content, it's all types of content. Things that are authentic, things that tell very particular stories from different parts of Africa. that tell our stories in different ways, in a very authentic way. And people are looking for that authenticity, especially when sitting on a plane, I think. But it has to be translatable. That when we deliver that package, it's either dubbed, or it's either subtitled, or it's in a language that people can understand. So that's kind of what we're looking for. So the conversations we're having with filmmakers all over the country, all over the continent, and now the world, is how can we partner with you to get your content out? Is anybody representing your content? Now, one of the key things that somebody mentioned earlier was ownership of IP and holding onto your IP. That's the first step. If you can't hold onto your IP, the kind of deals we need to be doing are deals where you have some sort of control of your exploitation of IP. Now, understand those are two different things. You could own 100% of something, right? And you could always own 100%. But I'll say to you, I would like to share it with you. I want to sell it, but I want 50% of the exploitation. It means that you are still the owner of that IP, but on the money that the IP generates, we will share. If I stop selling it, I will stop earning, but you will still own it. So these are very important conversations. I don't feel there's enough of them happening in our industry in general for content makers to understand how valuable IP is. With the broadcasters, we can see there's an evolution and a shift in the thinking with some of them in terms of being more open to that model and being open to different models, not just a traditional commission model. Lala's here from the SABC, and she will tell you that the industries have been challenged, so we're looking at more interesting models to try and make content and get content made. We can't depend on the traditional model of commissioning only to try and get content made, which means broadcasters are more open to discussing different types of ideas, pre-sales, licenses, etc., where in those cases you're kind of still holding on to your IP and you can still use it and monetize it in other ways, which means you can partner with us. So you can do a pre-sale with SABC and come to trades for distribution globally, and both companies will work in complete harmony to be able to do that. Historically, that was more difficult to do, but it's completely possible now. You could also go to an advertiser to fund your content. And I had a session yesterday morning at the university with some students, and we had a long conversation about AI and about using social media and digital platforms. TikTok, as an example, has 1.5 billion followers on TikTok, or users on TikTok. There's not a single TV platform in the world that can give you that audience. So a young filmmaker who's 16 years old, who hasn't gone to Rhodes yet, or hasn't gone to any film school, is able to use their Apple iPhone 7, even for that matter. Right? Who's got an iPhone 7 here? See, nobody. But I can use an Apple iPhone 7, which has a fantastic camera and audio recording device in it, and you can make quality that is good enough to be successful on TikTok. But it requires commitment, consistency, and creativity. So, and what's happening with young people, and I know some of them, because we work with some of them, especially in the entertainment space, they make thousands of dollars because they build followings on their own, without us, without our input, without our advice. They build followings and they build content strains where they're able to make money on their own. To the point where, if anybody knows who the sidemen are from the UK, one of the famous sidemen is a guy named KSI. He's of Nigerian descent. He's now a boxer, an entrepreneur. Has anyone drunk the Prime drink? Prime energy drink? Does anybody know it? One taker. You bought it for your kids. For your kids, or you bought it for yourself? For you. So Prime, the drink, I mean, it's sold millions of bottles around the world. That's a KSI-owned brand. That's where it's come from. He's built such a big social media following that he's now competing with Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Red Bull in terms of space in the fridge, because he's built a social media following that's created an economic certainty for him. And I'm saying the same thing to all of you sitting here. For those who are filmmakers and you're trying to make a movie is it's quite a difficult thing to do, because you need multiple funders in most cases. You need support from the ECDC, you need support from the NFVF, you need all of those things, but you'll still need more support. And the final mile that you try to close in your production funding is always the hardest. And that's where we come in. Normally a funder will say to you, I'm happy to give you the funding provided you have guaranteed distribution. Where are you distributing to? Who are you selling to? Who's going to watch it? And I'm talking about commercial funders and non-commercial funders here. And that's where we come in. As Trace Studios, we can give you a letter of intent to distribute your content, because we will take it and we will distribute it on a global platform. But that might give your funder sufficient confidence to be able to say, okay, here's your final mile of funding. Go and finish your show, right? It tries to ensure that everything kind of fits together. We picked up a deal last year in the session, actually, which is now in the process of being produced. And we've done a few more at other festivals as well. So we can see that it is working, that final mile that is very difficult. Also from an advice point of view in terms of the business model and how you want to shape your business model and how to kind of divide your business model to include talent or any other stakeholder in your business plan. Those are kind of things we can advise you and we can show you how to shape it. It's not overly complicated for us, but we understand that for emerging filmmakers it might seem like a mountain. You know, it's like a huge mountain to climb. But for us it's uncomplicated, so we try to demystify that for you and try to make that work for you. Also, by the same token, we've got great relationships and direct links into free-to-air, pay TV, the streamers. So we will find the model that kind of fits. Historically, if something went into free-to-air, it went nowhere else. Historically, we went onto pay TV, it went nowhere else. Now we know, and particularly with SABC, are completely open to a model where they're saying, okay, we're happy to show the content, but you can send it to Netflix, they can show it first, and after 6 months, we're happy to pick it up and show it in SABC One. So now your content has two potential platforms, both with a very, very large audience, both very different audiences, both non-competing audiences. But the one thing that it does satisfy, A, it gets you a bigger audience, it satisfies your funders, it gives the funders what they want, and three, most likely it gives you your better chance or your best possible chance of having a second show, or having a returning show, or having a returning season, or making your next project. It gives you credibility in the market. And there's something interesting, in our industry, credibility is everything. Like if you don't make something for 10 years, people forget about you, but it doesn't mean you forgot how to make it. But if you're making things, then people you attract, it's the laws of attraction, you tend to attract interest, funding, and opportunity for yourself. So, you know, we're open to having that conversation, and we are engaging with industry, we're engaging with NAVF, we've supported quite a few interns over the last year, and we plan to do so in the future as well, with very specific commitments to try and, all production around the country is being challenged in terms of its cost. What is the cost of production? And cost is normally related to the experience that's available on the production and the scale of the production. And, you know, I had a chat to Mark from ABDA just now, we've been chatting to NAVF. The idea is to do more partnerships with these types of institutions where we can source in a pool of young, talented people. And I say young and talented, these are the people I'm talking about who are 16, who are able to use a camera to generate 1 million views, whereas we spend R1 million and we can't generate 200, you know? So I like that challenge, and I want to infuse more of that thinking into what we're doing as a TV company. So when we make our next season of Ultimate Brewmaster, we're kind of focusing on a different audience, made by different people, made by younger people. And we want to expand it into things like Ultimate Brewmaster Kids and so younger type of products, because I think younger type of products can work on digital for us, and digital is just an important platform as pay TV or linear TV or streamers for us. So it's an exciting time in the industry. For example, they say, well, which channel will it go? How many people can we reach? Is there a digital platform for it? What's the engagement ratio? What is the reach? So these are questions as content makers we've got to understand. We've got to play in a different space than just raw creativity. We've got to understand also the analytics of the markets and the reach for our market. We've got to think about the science behind everything we make. Because if there's no science behind it, there's no point making it, because no one's going to buy it, no one's going to pay for it. So the biggest challenges we face, and the biggest challenges I've picked up from speaking to people and engaging with people in the market, is the disconnect between the idea and the funding. And quite often it's a creative thing, is that I'm making a passion project. It's called Put Beer on the Podium by Savan Pillay, and nobody wants to buy it because nobody's interested in putting beer on the podium. But if it was something else, if it was something that you all wanted, putting Prime on the podium, it would be different. You all funded, right? Exactly. So I said all of that to tell you that, by the way. So, but it's all about demand, and that's why I started off talking about economics, because this is about supply and demand. And if we understand what the demand is, then it's easier to build the supply, and it's easier to put all the different stakeholders into that line, into that daisy chain of events that needs to happen for your product to be made. And listen, and sometimes it's easy. Sometimes you pitch it once to Netflix and they go, wow, that's amazing, and they'll pay for it, right? But it comes at a cost too, by the way, because if you pitch to Netflix and they commission it, you don't necessarily own your IP. Netflix owns your So you've got to ask yourself, what do you want to do with that content? If you want to own your IP, then don't ask Netflix for all the funding. Ask them for some of the funding and find the rest of the funding through the stakeholders that can support it, because it'll give you leverage, it'll give you power, and it'll allow you to own your content. And then you work with distributors, and Trade Studios is not the only distributor. There are other distributors in the world. You know, you can work non-exclusively with distributors. So you can work with us for the African market, for example, and pick another distributor for the North American market if you so choose to. So there's different ways to skin that. But that's why I say that these business models are varied. There's different business models that can work. You've got to find out what works for you, what's going to make you happy, what can you live with. And if you're happy with giving away IP to be able to earn or get the revenue in to make a production, so be it. That's absolutely fine too. But if you're in the business of long-term sustainable filmmaking and you want to earn serious long-term revenue, you've got to own your IP to be able to distribute it. If you want to create royalty streams for your actors, for your producers and your directors, you need to own IP and you need a royalty stream to come in for that IP. So owning IP is really the keys to the kingdom of this industry, and it will create long-term sustainability. Try and imagine a filmmaker today who's made their first movie, and this is the model they use. And in 10 years' time, they've made 10 movies. And you have a distributor like us selling those 10 movies across those 10 years. You can imagine that's, in year 11, without having to work, that filmmaker would have made more money than we made in year 5. You get it? Without doing anything, just from pure royalties. And that's kind of the model. And that's the model that the whole world works on. And I'll give you one example, and I'll use an extreme example. Game of Thrones. I'm sure most of you have watched Game of Thrones, or House of the Dragon. But HBO makes it at a massive cost. It's an incredible cost. But they also sell it at an incredible price. So when a broadcaster buys it for the first time in their territory, they pay anywhere between $100,000 to $200,000 an episode just to buy it, right, for a broadcast. But then HBO sells it to 100 broadcasters around the world. So you work the mathematics out to understand. If they were selling it to 2 broadcasters around the world, they would not make Game of Thrones. You get it? Because there's no point. They'll spend more money than they make. So it's, in the end, it's still economics. So we have to try and create more products in Africa, particularly. That's our part. It's our objective. That can travel, that can be repeatable, that can earn annuity revenue for our filmmakers and for our content owners. Because everybody gains from that. If we're able to do that, everybody gains. And when people have conversations with me saying, I want to do it on my own, I can do it on my own, I always say that's the wrong conversation. You never see great things built on their own. They're built with teams, they're built with collaboration, they're built with different stakeholders being a part of that. And that's why I think what's happening here over the next few days is so important, is that there are different stakeholders there. There are influential people in this room, and you have an opportunity to meet with them one-on-one and to have those discussions and to hear from them. So to empower yourself, take ownership of your destiny and make the right choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pillai, for that. I think you have given us more insight. I think the audience in the room could agree that they would have liked to hear more from you. I think considering your experience in the industry, I think you've touched many key aspects. The issue of IP being key, the issue of distribution, is also key. So now I will take just 3 questions due to time. I think there's enough time to engage with Mr. Pillai, or if there are any other sort of interest, if you are interested in other areas or information, you can engage with him. He's here for the rest of the day. So I'll take about 3 questions. Okay. All right. I've been instructed that I will reduce my questions to 2. We have another panelist online because I don't want to let Mr. Pillai go without engaging with you. Can I take, there's one question here, then there's a second question there. Yeah. One question here.
Hello. Thank you.
Can we have have a mic here?
I was just curious to know about distribution in Africa. So I run an incubator with 10 first-time African animated TV series that are in development. And, you know, in the past, everybody said Africa is a really difficult market to distribute in. You're lucky if you're going to see your money. I'd like to know a little bit more detail around how that has evolved and what's the opportunity for distribution in Africa.
Let's take the second one so that we can reply to both of them. Second one.
That's one of the prevailing themes, shop steward voice.
Thank you so much. A quick one now. Would you kindly detail or take us through the process in getting that letter of intent you spoke about earlier? And that's
Okay,
it.
cool.
Thank you so
Cool,
much.
cool, cool. Thanks for the questions. The first one, and you're absolutely right, that's kind of been the history of African distribution. I think things have changed so much now because there's so many more platforms available, and that competition has really created a massive shift in the market. For example, the two major pay TV players in Africa are Canal Plus and MultiChoice. And right now, Canal Plus also owns 30% of MultiChoice. So there is a kind of merger that is under form there, and the thinking is very similar because they see each other less as competition to each other now, and they see streamers more as competition to them, you know, in terms of eating their market share. So what it's done for distribution, everyone's become a bit hungrier for different types of things, and it's allowed us to be able to go in there, and people are picking up. I mean, you've seen Canal Plus over the last couple of years. I mean, we're currently working on 3 drama projects with them, one in Ghana, one in Nigeria, where they're co-productions, they're putting money behind it because they want the original content to sit in French on their channels. But at the same time, they're giving us the option to take up the English version to distribute it wherever we feel. So, for example, we could produce, we're doing a show called Last Rights right now, which is a Nigerian show. It will be produced in French, but or in English, dubbed into French and broadcast on Canal Plus. But we could take the English rights and go straight to the SABC and say, we want this on SABC 1 and do a license deal there. So that's never existed before, but it's existing now. Canal Plus have no problem with that because they see English and French as 2 completely different markets. And it's done the same for animation. Animation is very flexible because it's so easy to put it into different languages, into different markets. And I think it's very exciting. I mean, even at Annecy, over the past few years, we can see that the nature of things are changing, and we can see a great demand for content. And one of the biggest areas of demand for African content is African animation. So there's a great opportunity for that in the future. And I think it will get better and better as time goes. So the way Canal Plus does the deal, if I'm the creator of the show, they will fund the writing and they will fund the production. I will still own my IP, but Canal Plus owns all the master rights to the show. The master rights are the global master rights, all languages. But they take the French version and put it onto their channels. They say to us as Trace, you can go and license the English and Portuguese versions to any part of the world. When we sell it, we share the revenue with Canal Plus, and if there's a third-party producer, with a third-party producer as well. So everybody in the value chain kind of earns.
Yes, the last question.
And then the last question, it's quite easy. You can just reach out to us either via website, or if you in particular want to reach out to me, you can speak to me now. But I mean, it's a simple thing, just emailing us and just saying to us, listen, I have a product, it's going to be ready, it's a movie or a series or whatever it is, and I'm looking for a distributor, and we'll start that engagement. Cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Mr. Peters. We will now move to the second part of our session, which would be looking at elements of funding. We have panelists. We have about 6 panelists. One of those panelists is joining us online. So we will request, in order to manage time, to to start with the panelist who's joining us online from DTIC, that is Mr. Eliano. We have two panels to go through this session, in this session, so we will try to be strict on time, but we want to ensure that everyone who's here gets the maximum benefit from our panelists. So I would like to connect to Mr. Ndo. Mr. Ndo, are you there? Afternoon, Mr. Ndo.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. We are happy for you to join us in this expo, Film Expo, Eastern Cape Film Expo. We are dealing with issues around film and television funding in terms of ensuring that there is development of the sector, not only in the country but in the province as well. Can you take us through, just introduce yourself and also just outline in summary some of your funding products that you have for the film sector, and also highlight for us maybe some of the constraints that you are picking up in terms of the ability of filmmakers accessing the different products that you have. If you may, if you have those statistics, maybe look in terms of the uptake in terms of the province in some of the film incentives that you do have as DTIC. I will hand over to you, Mr. Ndo. We are short of time. If you can stick to roughly 5 to 7 minutes, I will appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and greeting to everyone. You said 7 minutes, right?
Yes, let's try 7 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try my level best. I have about 22 pages presentation, but I'll try to extrapolate key informations. Yes, if you would allow colleagues for connectivity purposes, may I switch off the video?
That's fine.
One of the requirements is that you should open a new core, that we call it an SPCV. So part of that is that you should depose an affidavit that should be at level 4. And in terms of our incentive is that we offer about up to 50 million, but that is based on the qualifying percentage. So in terms of the imaging, go up to 50%. 50% of all your qualifying production expenditure. So if your qualifying production expenditure is about million, we will pay you 500,000. And that would also apply to all those other incentives. And in terms of projects that would have qualified, we have what we call for emerging and SA milestone payments, where you will have your first milestone and the fourth milestone where we'll pay you based on the tranches. But as far as your foreign and production, we'll pay you at the end of your production. I wanted to just perhaps highlight on the issues of constraints that we currently facing, and I must say that in terms of your province, I think we do have a very low uptake, and maybe something that we should engage with the ETC in terms of how do we engage more on making sure that we have a better project flow from that side. And I think events like these ones are a very good platform to do that. And in terms of the applicant who should apply to the DTI, is that we're saying you should have a company that is already existing in terms of your production company, that as I said, it should open in SPV. And in terms of your participation, is that in terms of the imaging, would only allow 5 projects, and with the SA and foreign, we don't have a limit as long as you're bringing investment. So the rationale behind the imaging is that we want you to at least graduate from imaging, and play at a higher level. And also in terms of administrative issues, is that at least before you start with your production, you should send your project within 45 days, but we would advise that at least apply or give your application at least 3 months before you start with your production, so that doesn't really affect much your production schedule, because you find that if you give us the 45 days, we'll have back and forth, maybe you find us oppressed with time, so you end up not enjoying the benefit of the incentive. I'm not so sure in terms of time, how am I doing?
You're left with 3 minutes. You can just summarize. I think you have highlighted the low uptake, some of the challenges, just the application process. If you are able to work with some of the applicants in terms of closing some of the gaps that you see in some of these applications, if you can just highlight that process.
Yes, most definitely. That we do more often, and is what we would encourage applicants to say. DTI is open to assist you with completing your application, assist you with understanding and explaining guidelines. So, but we do understand that there are those applicants that would prefer to use consultant, which we don't have a problem with that. But mainly for imaging, we would advise them to just seek assistance from the DTI, because we are here to help them in that regards.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ndo. Let me check with you. Are you able to stay with us online?
Yes, I will stay until 3.
Oh, okay. Is that fine on your side? Okay, that's fine. All right. We are going to move to other panelists, so we are going to invite all the other panelists to join us in front. I will invite the panelists from ECDC, National Video and Film Fund, NEF, and IDC to please join us. have two panelists. Afternoon. I think we are going to start with our panel discussion. We are still on the issue of funding. We understand that funding it's a cross-cutting issue. I think if you are in business, whatever sector or industry you are in, you'll always be confronted with issues of access to funding. I think the film sector is no different to that, you know. But there are a number of organizations, institutions who are providing funding to the sector in order to ensure that the sector is able to develop. So we are now going to hear from our panelists in terms of the different funding products that they have, what is the process to access that, and what are some of the common challenges that they encounter in assessing these the funding applications from filmmakers, producers. We also have Mr. George from ECDC. I think he will also go deep in terms of the journey that they have been through as ECDC, through the establishment of the Eastern Cape Film Fund, where they've generated almost 300 million in terms of investment into the province, investment into different films or features in the province that have taken place. I think it's a journey that he will also outline. You also hear him that there are already 16 applications that they are dealing with for this financial year. I will start with the gentleman nearest to me, just an introduction, the institution you are from, your different funding products, and some of the challenges that you are faced with in terms of dealing with applications, and what are some of the solutions that you can advise to the filmmakers. I will go in that order, starting with you, sir.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Kagisho Bapela. I'm from the Industrial Development Corporation. We provide funding for the film sector. As an overview, I think most of you are aware that IDC hasn't been funding films for some time now. So we resuscitated the process, and we have 3 strategic focus areas in terms of the industry, which is content creation, infrastructure, and distribution channels. And we actually support the industry through venture loans, cash flow facilities, which is now discounting the DTI rebate, making sure you've got a cash flow to finish your film. If you've got a pre-sale, we can cash flow the pre-sale for you. And for emerging filmmakers, which is mainly our major interest in building the pipeline of filmmakers, is that we are happy to even syndicate the funding in collaboration with the off-takers on the other side, either Netflix, Amazon, SABC, whoever else who's willing to pre-buy your content. And we can facilitate that process to make sure you can deliver your project on time and on budget. And of course, we insist on an ecosystem that makes sure that the production quality is intact and that the project is highly de-risked by knowing who's the off-taker on the other side. I think I'll keep it there for now.
Maybe just quickly, I think in the past you just said that you
Okay, so we don't necessarily send out calls for applications. We take applications throughout the year. Even today, if you have your pitch deck, you can give it to me. What had failed in the industry before was that we were supporting films, but the IDC was not able to get their money back. So from a risk appetite point of view, they kind of shut it down completely to say we keep losing money. Of course, for market reasons, for some some of them is production quality reasons. But I think the industry has evolved since that time. That the production quality is not really much of a big concern because we have enough ecosystem in the sector where we can control the quality of the product that's coming out. The main issue that we are dealing with now, and I'm glad Three Studios is also extending a lending hand to say we can distribute your content because that's what affects the commercial viability of the project. So that becomes a pain point even now to say who's going to buy this content, for how much, are you going to be able to service the debt, etc. But we are constantly looking for new ways, innovative funding techniques to support the industry. But our sense is that we need a more collaborative effort with the likes of ECDC in terms of regional projects, the National Film and Video Foundation for them to assess the content. So I think we're slowly getting to work together as government entities to create an ecosystem that will literally unleash the creative assets in the sector. And I must mention, I'm quite happy with the discussion that's going towards us emphasizing ownership of copyright, because that's a pain point, because when the filmmakers don't own that copyright, after years of playing in the sector, they still have nothing to show for it, because they can't live in perpetuity of those assets. So that's our number one priority, to make sure we support you to own your copyright. That if that means we cash flow DTI for you to buy equity into the film, that's what we're willing to do.
Thank you for that. Afternoon, everyone. So at the National Film and Video Foundation, I think our main the our main mandate is to develop the industry from skills to production and to audiences. Um, in terms of how we work, we have a number of projects that we do, special projects and normal projects. Working on that, we release calls about 2 times a year, where you come in and you give us your project, and of course, whether it be development or production, and we fund it over a period of 2 years. And of course, I think as part of development between ourselves and KZN, we are the only institutions that do fund development outside of broadcasters. And the reason why we do fund development is to mitigate the risk of projects going into production before they are ready. But over the years, we've then also had to look at where we are as a country, where we're coming from, and also had to develop other means of funding outside of the traditional funding, which is you come in with your project, but also look at addressing the needs in the industry. Women in this industry for the longest time will work in production, but will never really make it into directing their own film. And we believe that representation of women's voices is very important, and also representation of the youth is very important. So we therefore have programs that are tailor-made for the youth, like the Youth Filmmaker Slate, as well as the female, which is not necessarily about commercial viability, but about creating a calling card for directors and writers in that space. We've just concluded 2 of those for this year. So we get 2 companies to facilitate those productions, and we produce together with the SABC, who are our co-pilot in that. We produce 10 short films a year over a period of 3 years. And through that, we're able to do 2 things. One, we're able to create content in a huge number, but then also we're able to create the next generation of filmmakers, where some of the filmmakers that started like in the 2016 incubation, for instance, have now become television writers who write for all broadcasters, including the streamers. So I think more than anything outside of the funding, it is really to develop the skills. We also do funding for students who are going to university, but also over and above that, also funding postgraduate degrees which are outside of the country. We currently have 3 graduates every year that go to the Goblin Institute in France to be able to study animation, who then come back and plow back into the country. And one of those that I think the one that stands out is Lesego Feester, who's been able to go and study overseas, but also come back and give back to the industry. And over and above that, it's also audience development and marketing. And I think with the Eastern Cape, I mean, a couple of years ago, there were no applications from the Eastern Cape. But through the Sediba programs that we've been able to run in the province and doing other training and skills development programs, we've been able to see the number of applications from the Eastern Cape move from 5 to now over 25 applications. And of course, that means that the more applications we get, the more there's an opportunity to be funded. I think right now, at any given time, we have plus minus 10 projects in development from the Eastern Cape, so those numbers are growing. And I think also the work that has been done in the province, and I think about 2 years ago, just before COVID, when we had like production companies that were developed by people coming from the Eastern Cape coming back to make productions in the Eastern Cape. And at the back of my mind, I'm quickly thinking about the Yellowbone production that came in and plowed back into the industry and hired people. And now, over a number of years, you've got more projects that are happening in the provinces, and there's also people that we find in the province that have decided to stay in the Eastern Cape. So I think we do quite a number of things.
Thank you, Ms. Ngokotwana, for that. Let me hand over to Mr. George.
Thank you very much. I just want to say what Stephen said earlier on is very important. To start looking at the demand side of whatever product you want to sell is very important, because it assists those who evaluate the application for funding to look at the prospect for commercial viability of your projects. The Eastern Cape Film and Television Fund is an incentive to help you with the last mile of your financial plan. The requirements are simple, that the company that is applying should at least have secured a pre-sale or a commission agreement. But I think the flexibility here is that we discovered that some of our very good productions from young up-and-coming producers unable to get to that stage. And therefore, we provided, if you look at the guidelines, possibility for a pilot. But with that pilot, we provide a portion of that funding to enable you to do the production and release the pilot with the proviso that within 6 months you would have secured the pre-sale, or commission of that production. We come at the 3rd tier of funding. The applicant should be a South African, producer. But if you are not, you should give us evidence that you've got a South African-based, producer in partnership with you. We've got requirements such as 20% of the head of department should be secured from the Eastern Cape, and the full funding that comes from the ECDC should be spent in the Eastern Cape, and at least 70% of funding from other funders to be spent in the Eastern Cape. We do require acknowledgement in the opening and closing credits from the producer, and acknowledgement to be part of the executive producer. We also require that at least the skills transfer indicated at the application. So the guidelines are loaded on our website, as well as a very simple, straightforward application form that you can complete. And we have seen the rate of success of our applicants as now they're getting used to the application process. It's been modified and simplified to make sure that most of the applications or applicants are able to, to successfully apply. But it's incumbent on the applicant to make sure that you accurately provide information and the requisite documents, because without the requisite documents submitted, your application is likely to be disqualified, and we have to reapply. So it will consume your time. So it's very important that when you do the application, you make sure that the requisite documents are part of your application. In the event that your application for our funding exceeds the threshold of that particular, production, there is a leeway to the executive management to motivate with the executive management with adequate motivation, where the executive management is able to consider deviation from the threshold that are provided for various productions. Go to our website. The guidelines are there. The application form is available. It's simplified for the purposes, and all applications are submitted into the internal committee, which is the project funding committee, which approves. But we require that at least 3 months, from the approval, you should have started the principal photography. At least 60% of the principal photography should be taking place in the Eastern Cape. So it doesn't have to be 100% shot in the Eastern Cape. I think the process is simple, and application form is straightforward and simplified.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Viwe Ngabe from the National Endowment Fund. Our funding is basically still the same with my colleagues here. As well, I think the most important thing over and above that is the inclusion of the bond, that when you have these pre-sales agreed upon upfront, and then you've gotten the approval from Ms. Ndo, PTIC, and then there are things that you need to do, after finishing, and then once they come through and they see that, a certain spend percentage should be local, and if you don't finish that or you don't get to that percentage, and then that last threshold, when we have offered you the bridging finance based on what was given to you, then you'll find that then those becomes the delay. But then if you include then the completion bond, is that then our funding becomes more secured, and then you will then have to go with the guys that you have done the inclusion bond with, so that you then go and collect then the last tranche usually. So what we offer is still the same, is the bridging finance for you to actually do this movie or idea that you have, and then we will definitely fund it. We also accept applications. There's no time frame or months, but you can submit it online, hand deliver, and just go through the guidelines of what is expected. And I believe Mr. Play made a vital point in terms of ownership of your deal or your package, whether you want to give it to Netflix or do you want to in the next 10 years or 11 years see this thing. So it is very much vital for you to understand where you see yourselves as, and as us funders, we can coordinate ourselves between ourselves, which one do we take or how much effort can I put in. There's no problem with us co-funding. We've done a lot of co-funding in the Eastern Cape as well as nationally. So it is not an issue of saying it is purely based here in Eastern Cape, but charity begins at home. So so we would want to make sure that Eastern Cape does then put us on the map as it's growing. We want to see that more films are coming through and the funding is there and is available. Just one is to adhere to the guidelines which are there, and I don't believe that they are very much stringent. They're very workable, so it's not like a total red tape that we're just saying there's funding, but yet we want the whole cow instead of a leg. So it is available, and we do accept applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Makhala?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Bongajalo Makhala from the Eastern Cape Provincial Arts and Cultural Council. And within ACPAC, then I manage the film desk. ACPAC supports, the film sector through an annual call where we have a funding that is termed Siqaqamisa Ubugcisa. We would give out an open call to the industry. They would obviously respond with their proposal. We then go for adjudication, and upon that, we will, have outcomes and then contract, the various projects. We look at funding mainly micro projects. We do not have, a huge budget that actually, can support the entire, I would say, process of creation of, film. So institutions such as the NFEF, the DTIs, the ECDCs, then play a critical role in aiding, our, efforts of development. We look at supporting the actual content creation. Obviously, we are biased towards, Afrocentric content that is created within our province by our people, for us. We support projects of audience development, whereby, the consumption and creating spaces such as these, where, film festivals and, linking up the creators with the market as well. We are huge on skills development, whereby we actually take budding filmmakers and we plug them into professional sets, and they would then obviously obtain, the requisite skills that are needed in order to produce their own content. Over the past, I would say, 3 years, projects that we have supported have actually, are starting to gain national, I would say, success as they do go through to the National Film and Video Foundation and also, get the required support. Yeah, in terms of challenges that we do obviously experience is the level of skills. We believe that our application process is quite accessible, but a major challenge is the issue of compliance, whereby applicants, do not necessarily, these are creatives who do not necessarily all the time view themselves as business people, and it's quite important that, the compliance components are obviously, you make sure that you tick those boxes. And then it doesn't only end once we have actually contracted a particular production or project. Another challenge which we would experience is within the monitoring and implementation of the project, whereby we struggle to get, reports from filmmakers who are funded. They would have the implementation plans, but you actually discover that what has actually unfolded is quite different to what we had funded. So we find ourselves even at a position whereby we have to cancel some projects that we have supported and then redirect those particular funds to replacement projects. So the question of skill, is a huge one for us, whereby we obviously want to walk the walk, in developing, filmmakers, in developing the entities, in ensuring that we get the desired content that represents the province, in ensuring that the quality of the productions, that we then,
round of applause for our panelists. I think I think a number of issues have been raised. Low uptake, the application process is simple and accessible. Issues around compliance with the application guidelines, and it also came out that there is funding. Funding is available. It's there. There is no call for application. Throughout the year, you can submit your application. So let's hear then from the filmmakers. What are some of the challenges? What are your experiences? So now I'll open up for questions. Ask 5 questions. Then we'll go to our next panel. We're supposed to start our next panel by 10 past 2. Now we are at 11 minutes past 2. But I will allow just 5 questions, short and direct, so that we can release our panelists. Can we take questions quickly?
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you can please raise your voice, because we have an issue of sound when we are actually talking. Maybe this other mic, when you talk, please project your voice, because there are other guests that are online, virtual. Thank you.
1, 2. Is it fine now? Okay. Can we now take questions? I'll take 5. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Where's number 4?
Good day. I'm a filmmaker based in East London. I just have a question, probably to ECDC, NVF, and IDC, probably if ECPE can also assist on that. Let's say you have done productions for television, and you get commissioned by a television station, and then you've done 2 or 3 projects. Is there any possibility whereby when we come to you guys, we can skip many kind of things so that we'll be able to get funding for the project? Because most times it's like you would have done some work and a television has broadcasted your work, but when it gets to funding, there's a lot of things that are involved in that. Is there a way whereby if it's an established filmmaker or a producer or a director or writer, you can be like, no guys, we can assist you because you already have a track record? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Isabel Rourke from Animation SA. We're the only industry body that represents animators, animation studios, schools in South Africa. So we've identified Eastern Cape as the next province that has the potential for animation and gaming to be developed. So the strategy in which we're approaching that is by doing growth strategies. So we're currently going to be launching the KZN growth strategy at DFM next month. I just wanted to find out what the appetite would be for something like that for your province, and who would be most ideal in terms of funding, and not just the strategy, because what we've identified through our research is that a lot of strategies have been done in the past, like bridging the digital divide how many decades ago, and we still don't see that implemented. So we're also designing the implementation plan and a costed implementation plan, so that you have an idea of what that can look like. So yeah, my question is around what is the appetite for funding something like that in your province?
Hello, everyone. It's not a question per se. I'm a filmmaker, and I hear that everyone is saying the application process or application forms, they are easy. But when you are a creative, not um, we are not admin, like we are not business minded, you know. So I'm asking each and everyone, like department, to please assist the creatives with workshops, you know, concerning applications. That's very important because we do go and open companies, but we don't know how to like comply in terms of SARS and so on. And then we also don't know how to um, deal with admin specifically, because when we come to admin, it's just like we're just clueless. So we're asking if in future each and every department would please assist us with workshops, and you sit down with us and you take us through. And also maybe if you could also have examples on your your website on how to fill your forms and things like that. So it's just that, it's not a question, I'm just asking for future.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Xolile. I'm from Animation SA as well. I head up the gaming unit. So my question is, there's this crossover between various formats of media, right? And obviously film being a long-standing industry has a lot of support. Now, my question is,
Okay, those are the questions. I will invite my panelists to take a bite in no particular order in terms of addressing some of the questions that have been raised.
sometimes you take people's money.
Okay, now we are going to go to the second panel in terms of our session, which will focus on sourcing content from emerging producers. So I will invite my panelists to come up front to join us. We have Ms. Lala Tuku from SABC. We have Ms. Andiswa Manyati from Pumakapa TV, and we have Mr. Benjamin Kohli from Gravel Road Distribution Group. Can we invite our panelists? Discussion around content issues, telling unique stories, African stories, and if you look at the film value chain, it's one area that has been cited that we need to focus on in terms of developing proper quality content. And that goes with your audience. Who are you selling to? What's the appetite that is there for your content? And I think the linkages with accessing distribution as well were made in terms of what are the consumers wanting. So I think it's a particular area that you need to put particular focus on in terms of ensuring that you develop the right content. Also, elements of packaging, I think Mr. Pillay also referred to that there are stories out there, but are we packaging them properly? So there's a lot of work that needs to also be put in around packaging the content. The content is there, but are we really packaging it properly in order to ensure that we are able to produce this content? So I do have my panelists here who will share with us the process of sourcing content from emerging producers for broadcasting and distribution. So I will start with Ms. Lala Tuku from SABC, and then I will go to Mr. Benjamin, then to Ms. Manyati, in that order. Thank you.
Hello, I just put it on. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Lala Dugu, and I look after content for the national broadcaster, the SABC. We have 5 channels: SABC 1, 2, and 3, and then we've got the sports channel and the education channel, and then recently we've just launched SABC Plus. I hope all of you have it downloaded. You get your linear programming, but on your phone, on your tablet, and it's all free. So go to SABC Plus. In terms of content, and I'll stick to what the topic is at hand in terms of soliciting or getting content from emerging producers and emerging storytellers and new voices, which I think is critical for where we are. So as a national broadcaster, our main mandate is to educate, entertain, and to inform. Representation is important, so every single person in South Africa has to see themselves represented on television. We've recently, so in my portfolio, I look after drama. Drama has the opportunity and possibility to hold what we call prime time. So we spend a lot of money on drama. Annually, we spend about 1.2 billion on content. So drama really has the largest budget, and then we've got entertainment, so that would be all your reality shows, and then we've got factual. There we really look at the documenting of our own stories. I'm reminded of a filmmaker that said a country without documentaries is like a family without a photo album. So that becomes quite critical, and I've got a particular interest in really telling our stories from everywhere. And so that call is also open. Then we've got education and children. So again, in our mandate to educate and to inform, we really do pay a lot of focus on those genres. And then lastly, we've got religion as well. So those are the 7 genres. And since last month, we've now got an e-portal. So you can actually go online, submit your company details. What you have to be first to work with the SABC, you've got to be compliant. I would like to change the narrative that creatives are not admin people. I think we have the power to change that narrative. It is critical to look at yourself as a business, whether you are selling story, whether you are selling art, whether you are selling a laptop. We are all business people. And the more we can see our craft as a business, that's when you will look at the commercial viability of your product. So yes, you may be a writer, but those words per second that you're writing, what are they going to produce? And in money terms, what does that mean for you? So I think there's a huge drive, even as government, we have to make sure we do those workshops. I think the lady at the top spoke around workshops of this nature is critical. So we've got that e-portal. So you can't even go to submit proposal until you're compliant. So you can't even get to that button until you've got your ducks in a row. But we will do those. And I think at the end of the month, I'll be doing a short video just to how to just really make it simple. Yeah, so we'll do a video and we'll put it on YouTube. I myself, in my previous life, was a producer, was an actress, was a writer, so I really do understand and I really do get it. But it's important for us to cross that line, and creatives are one of the smartest people that I know, so we can be business people. And so really we are looking for content. I forgot to mention the other thing I do at the SABC, which is really look after industry development. So this, I think, talks to the industry development. We are so keen for new stories. While I was sitting there, I was trying to look at this month's report to see how many projects we've got on air that comes from this province. And I'm sitting with a percentage of 4% from everything that's on air. So we're sitting with a province that's underrepresented. We look at producers, then we look at stories filmed in the province, we look at participation. But what we have done is got into an MOU with ECPAC, again, just to fast track that. So we've got 3 shows in the pipeline that we'll be working on. So I think for us, the kind of stories we are looking for, S1 is very mass. And we are really dubbing it as youth. We want to hear the voices from the youth. And we're actually interested in those young producers. I always joke with Babu Mfundi to say, generations for young people must produce it. But it's really about really what does representation look like? At the heart of it, what does it mean? And so that's S1. It's very mass, it's Nguni. And then S2 is more family viewing. You will see in the next 3 months, we'll really be slanting it. So we're looking for 2 mass channels. That will be 1 and 2. And then 3, we've always said, is for the millennials coming in there. I think anything else I can take then in the questions. But I would like to talk around ownership. So for a very long time, SABC used to commission work. So we could it's either solicited or unsolicited. Unsolicited means we didn't go out to market to look for the content. You've got the idea and this is what you want to sell. So that is open throughout the year. So if today you've got an idea, your business is compliant, you can go in there and you can submit and we will then have a look at it. We promise a 21-day turnaround. So in 21 days, you'll get a feel of is it a yay or a nay. So that would be full commission. Full commission, we own it 100%. We pay for it 100%. We amortize it 100%. You are not part of the deal. And I'm putting it like that so we can understand what that means, right? That's a pure commission. So you come with the idea. We would then workshop it. We'd put a commissioning editor to it. They'd panel beat it with you to tell the story. You would always be credited, but it's an IP and it's an asset for the SABC. What we're moving towards there, though, because we understand that an industry is based on ownership. We can't have an industry unless we own, our industry owns. So the pre-sales become then the way to go. So if you submit, you are compliant and you submit, and then I just see pre-sale or AFP, I open that first. No, I'm joking. We've got a process and we open all of them. But the pre-sale, it comes with money. So you've got a partner, you've gone to APEC, you've gone to Svan, and then you come to the SABC and you say, I've got 70% of the guys, then we come in at 30%. You then can amortize it with us in perpetuity. For example, we've just sold Yizo to Netflix. So, and that's again a portion of the SABC that all our stories, we want to take it to the world. So we sell it to Netflix. Now, if you owned part of those rights, you would then sweat that asset. So wherever it lives, whichever place it lands up in any territory, then you have, so that's a pre-sale. Advertiser funded content, it's where you've got a great idea. It's a beautiful reality show. I got called by KFC 5 days ago and they were like, what can we do? Integrate me somewhere. And I said, no, let's do like a young date, a people's dating show, and their first date, they take each other out to KFC. I don't know. But it's like, it's not obvious integration. It's not an advert, but it's in story. Those kind of things. So if you've got ideas like that, you can go first and sell to a brand. And then you come to us. What we then do is we give you a rate card. You will buy the slot and the adverts in between. But that is solely yours. So you can go and shop it anywhere else. We don't have claim to it because you've already bought your airtime. So those are the different ways of working. And then lastly is the co-productions, which I think you are aware of. 2 partners can come in together and then you can co-produce and we'll be your distributing arm. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Benjamin Cowley from Gravel Road Distribution Group. So we are a distributor, much like Sivan from Trace. Yeah, where do we start? We know how to work portals very well. You'll note that the portal will also send you to another portal to register, where you have to do a whole bunch of things, and then you can come back to this portal to carry on your registration. No. You first go to CSD, then you go to SABC, then you... Yes, unfortunately, admin is the bane of everyone's existence, I guess. Maybe accountants and lawyers enjoy it a little bit more, but it's a necessary evil. So it's something that we can all do, or we all need to consciously make the effort to actually empower ourselves, not necessarily only rely on others to teach us that process. So take ownership of that. Therefore, you're taking ownership of your own journey and your own destiny. That's all that I can say to that. In terms of where we come into the picture, as Gravel Road, and I can't speak for other distributors, we try to, when it comes to local content, try and get involved as early on in the process as possible, because our experience has taught us that by the time the filmmakers have gone through the effort of creating a product and they deliver a product, unfortunately, the product doesn't meet necessary standards in order for us to go out and sell that product into the marketplace. So we've kind of decided on the position where we would like to get involved much earlier. That obviously means that we have certain capacity limitations as well. As much as we'd like to get involved with a lot of projects, we have to kind of cherry pick what we get involved with. And there's a couple of very important things that we look at when we do get involved with projects. Number one is, does the filmmaker know who their audience is? And any filmmaker who comes into the room to say, well, the world is my audience, that's a first flag for me when I go, well, the world is not your audience. You need to tell me exactly who your audience is. Where do they sit? What do they consume? What are the other shows similar to the one that you have that they are watching, where we can actually measure against? Right down to what is the favorite color of socks that they like to wear. You really need to understand your audience, and I can't emphasize that point enough. There is no such thing as a Pan-African story with respect to everyone. We are multicultural within Africa. Okay, so you're going to have a core audience, your core or key target audience, and then you're going to have secondary audiences with plug around that, yes, and then there's going to be interest, but you need to understand who your core target audience is before you go out the gate. Then we start to take a look at who is involved with the project. So is there a good producer, good filmmaker, the good writing team? What is the package that comes with that? Because at the end of the day, if we're going to be working with you, we want to make sure that you can actually deliver on the product that you are saying that you're going to deliver on. Because it is a long road, it's a long journey. It's not one day you wake up in the morning, you decide you want to make a movie. We're going to be on this path for many, many years to come. So we want to make sure that the team, the jockeys that are going to be driving this, are going to be able to deliver in the end, because we're investing, you're investing, and all the other stakeholders are going to be investing in this. So there's no point in backing projects which are not going to see the light of day because of that. And then, most importantly, is do we feel that we can add value to your film or to your project, and vice versa? Do you feel that we can add value to your project? Do you feel it's a symbiotic relationship? It's working together. It's not a us and them or you and them, you and us kind of relationship that we get involved with. It is a very, very long journey. So we like to be positioned that we know, we try to think, or we do think that we are the experts in what we do from our perspective. You're the expert in what you do from your perspective. Those are two different skill sets. When we talk to you about market, who's going to be buying it, what does SABC want? We're dealing with SABC as an example. SABC is one of our customers. We deal with them on a daily basis. We're constantly having conversations. We're having high-level conversations in terms of going, well, that's what the strategy is. This is working. That's not what's working. It's information that you might not necessarily have had access to, but that's the insight that we can share and help guide your project into the right pigeonhole that you need it to go into, or into the right place that needs to go into. So, and then taking a look at, if we're getting involved early on in the project, is we can help structure your finance in such a way that it best results in that big thing that we're all talking about here is IP ownership, right? We love the idea of being able to flip something very quickly to a Netflix or another stream, etc., where they take everything from you, and then you kind of like, well, it's a big check potentially that you get, but the longevity of that doesn't really make sense to anyone, even as us as a distributor. We take on the rights, we work with those rights for up to 10 to 15 years. We need to be able to sweat that asset for as long as possible so that everyone can continue to benefit from it. So when we get involved, we try and guide the project in the way that you structure it, from a combination of your co-production, your pre-sales, your grants, etc. There's so many different ways that you can kind of put something together in order to maximize your ownership and what you walk away with at the end of the day, so that you actually stay involved. This is your pension. If you have 10 projects that are all generating you revenue over the next 10 to 15, 20 years, that's what's going to keep you going. Our job is to make sure that your film makes money. Your job is to make your next film. So you make your film, you give it to the people who can make you money from it. You continue doing that, and you go from one project to the next, and that's how the relationship works. My best or biggest advice is don't try to do it all yourselves, because you will falter. And that goes to the point of team up with people who can support you. So the creatives, bring on a strong producer who's good at the admin. You've got to know enough to know that the producer's not trying to schneid you. Okay, that's very important, and vice versa. So trust the people you're with, know enough so that when you do look at the detail, you're empowered to understand what's going on. but still you have to be able to trust the other people to execute on what they are strong with, and you do what you're strong with. It's a big ecosystem, lots of moving parts in it. If I use an analogy, it's like a big machine, it's a big clock, there's many different cogs, and we all have our roles to play. If one of those cogs comes out, the watch doesn't work, okay? So it's important that we all stick to our lanes, and we make sure that holistically this ecosystem works.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Anderson Manyati. I'm from Mbumakapa TV. First of all, I'd like to apologize so specifically Abakowe for arriving so late. It was my intention to arrive and get a feel of what's been happening, but certain things did come through, but I'd really like to apologize about that. Currently, I am content managing at Mbumakapa TV. Now, for those who don't know, Mbumakapa is a regional channel which is currently available on DSTV channel 260 on all the platforms. So whether you've got access or you are premium, we are there. And that's one of the nice things about it. We started off as Bay TV, which was in 2011. So we're quite a young channel, and over the years, we've grown to change our branding and become Bumakaba, which means Eastern Cape. So we've come to notice, since we come from Nelson Mandela Bay, we did represent more of the Nelson Mandela Bay region. So now we wanted to spread our wings, so we make sure that we actually become the storytellers of the Eastern Cape, because if you'll find, there isn't actually a channel on the Eastern Cape besides Bumakapa TV right now. So with that vision, we obviously need to make sure that we are telling the stories not only of the Nelson Mandela Bay or the surrounding regions, but we are also spreading it across the Eastern Cape. So we started, developed an office at the BCM area. So we managed to get the content from that side to spread it and make sure at least people can see that we are telling their stories. Currently, we are working on getting offices also around the BCM area and also Isara Batman area. The content we currently have basically is mostly religion, but we have content from entertainment, cultural affairs, current affairs actually, and also we have a bit of lifestyle and reality that you will see on the channel. And we are looking towards making sure that we are representing the Eastern Cape, like I said. So we want the producers of the Eastern Cape to start using Bumakapa TV as a platform, especially the upcoming producers, because if you notice, the channel is quite dominant with the youth. So that is where you come to learn, that is where you grow yourself. That is the mandate that the channel is trying to make sure they prove and bring along to the province in itself. So we are that platform for that struggling artist who doesn't know what they want, how to get in. So you come in, you ask your questions. We've got an open door policy because we ourselves are also growing. So we need to learn from different platforms that are happening there. Now, a lot of content that is missing, as you know, the Eastern Cape is quite rich in terms of agriculture, automotive industry, and also a bit of the actual history of our culture. I mean, since we are Amaxhosa and we've got kingdoms, and there's so many things that you can tell and let people know about, and that platform right now, and the Eastern Cape Bumakapa channel is there for you to do that. Now, we have been actually getting films inside the series. Last year, one of the films that we broadcasted actually managed to get an Eastern Cape Award from in East London, BCM, of which that is something we're actually proud of. And we have a cultural show which bases itself on Maskandi that also won an award in a Joburg in the Maskandi genre, which is quite something we're excited for, because as a growing channel, we need to see that actually our work is being seen out there, and that in itself, I think, proves itself. So going on in submitting and making sure that the channel can notice you, we have a platform of where you can send your proposal, and then we have a committee, a content committee, who will go through your proposal. Depending on whether or not you have actually shot the program or not, or the series, we will try and advise. I always say if you want to put in your content at Bumakapa TV, it's always wise to just get an idea of the quality control check that we do. We are more than willing to give the technical spec to aspiring producers out there, just so you know if whether or not you are on the right track of what we want. Because a lot of the times when we disappoint content submissions, it is a lot to do with quality control and how the film is produced and the quality spec. The content is always something you're looking for, but then it's hard to actually put it out there to broadcast. So I always advise, on the website we've got our details. I wanted to actually show the details on the screen, but I guess we're not doing presentations right now. So basically you send the proposals to the channel. If it's not, it needs to be shot, we will go around and shoot a pilot and then advise on how you can change the content of what it is that needs to be changed on the actual program in itself. And then we take it through a process. We work a lot with bulk content. So if it's a series, we have to make sure that you can shoot the whole entire season. So if we tell you we're putting you on the third cycle and you can't actually maintain the whole full season, we need to get those details out there and see what your production plan is and how we are going to assist you. That is something we really need to do. We are aiming to do. We've got excellent studio facilities that even if your dream is not really to you to be on the channel, but if you need some kind of technical assistance, we do outsource those kind of facilities as well. So it's something you can look into and see how we can assist. We've got those kind of things for you. So we are looking into a lot of film and documentaries. Like I mentioned, we've got a lot of stories to tell, but resources and actually research can be quite hard to get in because, as I said, we are a young channel and we're trying to grow as much as we can and make sure we're getting exposed to the Eastern Cape. So lastly, I just want to also emphasize to young producers, because I do communicate with a lot of upcoming producers a lot, and the admin issue is something that is a struggle, and I also feel like it's something that we need to work on, and also let's delegate to our teams who has the strongest points. That's why planning is also important and doing your research. A lot of the films that you see, we've been part of productions that we actually see that research hasn't really been done. You know, I was once part of a production where we are in the rural areas, and obviously we're young, we don't know the marriage rules. And then we had a scene where Makoti has to take tea to the elders. And then one of the ladies who lived there was like, but that doesn't happen. Makoti does not go to a plant. And we honestly didn't know. To us, we just want the scene in the tea, you know, those type of things. So that research needs to actually be seen and actually be done. It's something we let aside because we just want the movie done and seen. But it's something very important that producers need to consider while telling their stories, getting those facts right about certain things. But other than that, I feel like the Eastern Cape finally is getting recognized. I mean, the Empire is here. So as we grow, let's grow with knowledge, and let's grow and let's respect our brands, because that's how we're going to be able to reach that platform of being known internationally. You start small and then you find yourself growing into bigger platforms that are around in South Africa and also internationally. I think that's about it. I'm not going to, if there's any other questions.
Thank you for that. I'm seeing my program director or facilitator already standing up. I think you shared some key inputs around the issue of quality and standards, and also the aspects of commercial viability of films, and also some of the platforms that are there and what you are currently looking for in terms of content, which genres you are focusing on, and also reflecting on the low uptake in terms of content that is also coming up, coming from the province. So I think there are opportunities for content producers from this province. Yeah, 4%. 4% is the number. We also hear from TTIC that there's low incentives that are available for the film industry. If maybe we can smile at our facilitator, maybe we can take one penny question. One penny question. One question. Going once.
There's an important portal that you need to be on called the CSD, the Central Supply Database, which is obviously where all your yeah. So you need to all your compliance things sit on the CSD. So before you can before you can work with any state-owned or any government agency, you have to be compliant on CSD. So once you start filling in your one application, you'll very quickly get told you need to have your CSD number ready to go. So then you've got to go and you've got to do all of that. Then you come back to that because they're going to reference that CSD application. So yeah, it is part of doing business.
Our panelists are still around. I'm seeing a hand.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, sir.
Okay.
In fact, since we're going for a break, let me suggest that we've got to take like 15 minutes break. Now it's 5 to it's 5 to. Okay, so yeah.
Since we came to the part in the day where we also talked about distribution, and in the earlier session, I wanted to share this bit of information in my presentation, but we didn't use the PowerPoints. But one of the resources in Germany, the World Cinema Fund, which gives funding for the development, production, and post-production of films, also has its interest in audience development, audience engagement strategies. And since their reason of existence is to support the development of World Cinema Fund region film industries, they do cooperate with these countries, national film institutes or festivals, or even sometimes it could be through the TV stations or so on, to do workshops on these audience development strategies. They have done it around the world, in Brazil, Burkina Faso, Cuba. Yeah, I thought maybe this could be a piece of information to think on. It could be done with South Africa. It could be linked with the World Cinema Fund.
Thank you. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lazarus, for actually handling this session very well. It was very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard people from SABC about the commissioning rights, our distribution. Why is it important when you actually at a developmental stage always think of the distribution as well? So let us take a 15 minutes break, but paused. I think we should come back here and maybe while we are on tea break, the speakers that were actually presenting today, you can communicate with them. I thank you. Pause, ladies and gentlemen.
guess what? All those 11 writers, they wrote something in the script. And that's what made it interesting, right? And when you watch television, when you watch, especially what I like to watch actually, what I always say to writers, start watching the local content. Umzansi Bioscope. Some of the stuff might be fluff, some of the stuff is really, really good. But look at the credits. How many writers for all those stories? You'll find, well, there's 5 writers, right? Each one of them wrote a certain element out of the script, which gave the script life. You know, because sometimes you can have writer's block and think to yourself, actually, you know what, maybe I'm not good enough. Nobody is never good enough for anything. You just need to add an essence of what you need to do when you write a script. So that's why I'm saying that teamwork is good. It's good. Let's get used to having build up of teamwork, because somebody else might be good in writing comical elements of the story, you know, like funny bits of the character, what they're going to do. Somebody is good at writing the dramatic effect of the character. Maybe they got into a bit of like drama into the script, you know. Somebody else might be good in writing the controversy of the script. Somebody else might be good in concluding the script, you know. You never know. But the most important thing is that you need to keep the script alive, you know, from beginning, middle, and end. Because literally, your script has those 3 important fundamentals. The introduction, how are you bringing the audience into the start of this film? Because as much as you're writing the script, it's not about like poetry. Poetry is you projecting. You know what I mean? You're just projecting the feelings, you're projecting the moment, you're projecting whatever. With the script, how are you introducing the viewer? The viewer is not involved in what the reading is all about, it's only the funder. But sorry, I am getting distracted with the in and out. Anyways, the viewer is only involved at the visuals. How you're introducing the story has to be dynamic. You know what I mean? Like your opening scene, you've got to write it as the viewer wants to see it. You know what I mean? Like for me, the first 2 minutes, if actually 30 minutes, because nowadays we've got a short concentration span. The first 30 seconds of that film, if it's not captivating or interesting, I flip the channel. You know what I mean? Like that means as a writer, you didn't quite get the idea of how you actually bring your audience, how you rope your audience in. So my thing about the introduction is very, very important. How you actually introduce your story is a very powerful effect on how your audience will actually appreciate the story. So this story is literally all about the issue of teenage pregnancy, right? Now it's a PSA, but we're not going to develop it as a dry PSA. We've seen multiple adverts and all of that, because obviously storytelling is all about what is the message you're trying to bring into the story. Every story has a message. For example, we see a lot of content nowadays that is all about violence. I think those messages all about, okay, where is the violence stemming from? Where is the environment coming from? But I think that kind of content, we've overseen it. Therefore, what else could be new? You know what I mean? How else can we bring different messages into our films? For example, currently, this is an issue of the current pandemic of teenage pregnancy. But we don't want to make it boring.
evolve your story, evolve it as well. Now, obviously now we know that the phone rang. Now you can't just leave the audience hanging, the phone rang and then obviously, boom, it's already in the other scene. The audience is going to want to know what was that phone call all about. You bring that in, right? So now obviously this is dialogue. Phone call conversation is between the brother, Ukawe, and his brother. Now we already know, well, okay, he's got a brother, right? They talk, it's talking about the grandmother. Well, did you give her pills? Blah, blah, blah. Already now, the pill situation gives you an idea of who the grandmother is, right? Boom. And those are things that you bring in to explain what is going on. Okay? And then it goes on, the conversation ends. But it doesn't end like that. We see him now, body language changes, right? He changes from being you've got to label your things, right? You've got to number and label. So that when the assistant director comes and wants to break down your script into a schedule, they know, well, okay, page 4, scene so-and-so is what we're shooting today. Because we're not going to shoot in the order of how you wrote the script, like exterior, interior. We're probably going to want to shoot interior scenes first, then move to the exterior, because we also have to think of the weather. You get what I mean? Okay? So now here we are. Now we heard the bell ringing for assembly, right? We heard that. So now we bring why the bell was ringing. We're bringing it to Ulwazi High School assembly day. Right? Now we're following through the story. What's going on in the assembly? Typical assembly day for any school. Principal is talking, all the learners are out there. It's an active move. You know what I mean? Everybody's there. That is a beautiful thing because now you have a whole wide of people, students, everyone is there. How you're going to treat this scene is a very important thing. And also the other thing is you have to think about as the writer is the budget. For I, the producer, I'm not going to pay 180 students. No, thank you. No, thank you. That will cut the budget deeply. But we've got to be strategic about it, right? So you work with the school as the producer. So writer, okay, what's your vision? We'd like to have a full assembly day, and we want all the students, 180 of them, principal, teachers, everyone out there. Now, what's our plan? Okay, no, don't worry, I'll speak to the principal. When's your assembly day? Boom, right? So that's how you work with your script. You must work hand in hand with your producer. That's just how it works. As a writer, get a good producer. Find one. There are producers. They're there. They're alive. They're kicking. They're fresh with wanting to find that money. Okay, I do love money. I really, really do. And I really love good scripts because good scripts equal money. Right? Yes. You know what I mean? So my idea here is that you as a script writer, you do your thing. You know what I mean? And you do it so well that I can actually get that money for us, you know? But also do not kill the budget with the overbearing ideas. So anyways, we've got the principal. The principal has to talk, right? So they talk. It's all about that. And obviously here, the principal is giving ideas about the achievers. We're giving them presentation, we're applauding them, We want the achievers to be known. Good, right? So that's what the principal is talking about. And then we introduce the other characters of the story. We are introducing them through the prize giving of the day of the assembly. We've got Usman Gele, he's been given an award. He's also 18, meaning he's also in grade 12. He's got what? 92%. Wow. You know what I mean? That's applaudable. It's worth to be given an award. So we go on. You've also got to give us other kids giving us applause, you know. It's not like you're not gonna, you have to tell, but what are the school children doing? Are they cheering? Are they applauding? They're gonna do something. You've got to write that in. Okay, then it goes on, and then Kawe speaks, and then Mr. Boy obviously is the principal. I mean, we actually have one of the characters that was here, which is cool. Mr. Paso, there he is, who was our principal. Anyways, so you give that information, right? It's there, it's got to be there. We've got to know what is going on. Okay, cool. So the learners dispersed to class. Boom, we're done with that scene. But now where are we going to? We're going to class, right? In class, Mr. Boy again, who's the principal, who also now is the teacher. Now we know. Okay, Mr. Boy is how old? He's 45. He's giving what? Life orientation lessons. Interesting for a male character to give life orientation lessons because we're talking about the obvious topic here. And this is now the middle of the script, right? Almost towards the middle of the script. Now, this is where you are introducing the essence of your topic. Why are we doing this film? And here the topic is about teenage pregnancy. And this is where we are introducing the actual topic at hand. 5 minutes, okay, cool. This is where we are introducing the topic at hand, and we do it through a life orientation lesson. Because we don't want to be boring and obvious, but at the same time, we've got to pass the message, because the film is a PSA at the end of the day, right? Okay, so it goes on. Other characters are talking, they're laughing, they don't want to talk about the topic. You know what I mean? It's a topic that no one talks about, but we have to bring it in. But it ends up being interesting because the children become interactive, right? And that's the whole point. And that is the point of what schools should be doing, is to give the children information about the situation. You know what I mean? And about the importance of earning your distinctions so that you can pass and be something in life and not have kids and let your life like wait a bit. Anyway, so it goes on. So I've got 5 more minutes. I'm not going to go now further into the detail, but the middle part of your script, that is where you bring your controversy. Now, all your characters in the introduction portions of your script, you would have brought in some type of idea where some of the issues in. For example, we could see there was a problem with the grandmother and the brother. In the middle of the script, now you bring in that controversy. We need to see, where's this grandmother, what happened, blah, blah, blah. Now in the script, we see the grandmother has passed away, there's a hearse outside the house, the power comes home from soccer practice, there's a hearse outside there, and blah, 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 right? Now we can see the idea of it. So that's the meat of your film. You've got to bring in the controversy, the solutions, the tensity of things. Also now, we also know that in the story, the Skawe and Unakane, they are actually lovers in high school. That's also something you've got to bring in, because we can't talk about teenage pregnancy and not also bring in the relationship aspect of these high school people. But now the turnaround of this is now where towards the conclusion of the story is that they get themselves into a situation, because your characters and your viewers, you've got to give them the situation. So they end up doing the deed, and they realize in the end that this is a problem that could lead to pregnancy. She gets paranoid, her mom is a nurse, And so it goes on, right? But in the conclusion, why it's called the love pledge is that she breaks it off with him because she wants to focus in studies, and that is what it is. But 10 years later, in the beginning, they're together, married, because why? They made a conscious decision. That's your conclusion, right? So I'm rushing all of this because I'm running out of time, but I want you to keep in mind and make a note that when you write, you've got to keep it interesting. That's why you can bring in other writers if it's your first time writing, right? And you know that maybe you're going to get dry or you're going to have writer's block. So that they bring in the other elements and the other meat of it and all sorts of technicalities within. Maybe you've got a stronger writer that understands the jargon, bring them in to make sure that they can bring your script alive. And so, ladies and gents, to the filmmakers, to the writers, I wish you all the best, but you know what? Write your details on that register, and we will keep in touch, and should you guys need any extensive sessions of this type of particular training, we are here. You're not alone, okay? And that's me, Sivu Kiba. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kiba, for that lovely presentation. For those of you who joined us at our first outreach screening in Joza Youth Hub, you might have watched Ms. Kiba's documentary called Uhadi. Unfortunately, on the day, we weren't able to have a Q&A, so if you do have any questions regarding that as well, I'll allow it. But as Sifu said, let's keep things interesting. I'm going to now welcome our next speaker, Mr. Loiso Makoma, who is a seasoned producer, screenwriter, and script consultant, whose work you might have seen on Mubango. Also, can we please refrain from using this excerpt right here, as it's very distracting to the speakers. There is a door that's open on that side, so if you absolutely have to leave, please use that door. Can we give him a round of applause?
Okay, I'm forced to use the microphone because we're live streaming. I'm not a microphone person. But in any case, guys, what moves our lives forward? Why do we all exist? Why do we exist? It's because our mothers wanted our fathers wanted our mothers. And our mothers in turn wanted our fathers. Right? It is desire. It is wanting something. Does that make sense? If you don't want something, you are stagnant. You just sit here. As soon as you want something, it compels you to move forward, to move toward what you want. Does that make sense? Do I have to have this thing? Who's the youngest person in this room? Any one of you can come. So come stand right over here. Okay. So now here's the thing. She wants a tin of Fanta. Please go get your tin of Fanta. She gets what she wants, the way in which she wants it. Are you guys intrigued by that? No. Not really. Okay. Please put the Fanta down. Now I need a brute of a man. Now I need a brute of a man. Eh? So guys, here's another thing about wanting something, right? If you want something, what is immediately attached to it? Eh? Okay, I'm almost after something simpler than that. When you want something, our immediate curiosity is whether you are going to get it or not. Does that make sense? So can you see wanting something is our first point of curiosity? Does that make sense? Because it raised the question, are you going to get what you're after or aren't you? Okay? Yeah. What's your name? Silu. Her name is Silu. Can we give her character name, please? No, she's not Silu. She's acting. So she has to have a character name. What's the character name? Ngando. Okay. All right. What's your name, sir? Lover boy. Okay, you lover boy. Okay. Right. So the first time what happened? She walked over and she claimed her goal. What's changed? There's an obstacle. So guys, these are the fundamentals that people miss out on in writing. Okay? A lot of people come into our industry and they don't learn the fundamentals and they learn the wrong way of writing story. Does that make sense? You can never have someone wanting something and not have an obstacle in the way of getting it. Does that make sense? Go get your goal again. I got to You understand? Is it now as easy to get what she is after? Right. Okay. So guys, we have to have someone wanting something, right? And we have to have an obstacle that stops that person from getting it. Does that make sense? Because that makes the pursuit harder. Right? Fundamentally, story is a test. Ultimately. Does that make sense? Okay, can you guys please go back to your positions? Let's talk about the nature of a desire. Right? You guys don't go away. Come back. So let's talk about the nature of a desire. Is the pursuit of a tin of Fanta interesting? Are you serious? Okay. Let me approach it from this direction. Okay? The smaller the pursuit, the less interesting the pursuit. The bigger the pursuit, the more important the pursuit. Right? The more interested in it we are. Does that make sense? Okay? I wish I could make an example. Nothing comes to mind at the moment. But let's try and make this Fanta important, so we're more interested in the story, okay? The reason that our story has to be the most interesting story there is because it competes, okay? You don't create something that sits anywhere that doesn't compete with something alongside it, okay? So we go out at 9 p.m. What else is at 9 p.m.? Mubango on SABC2, there's a show on SABC1, there's a show on Mzansi Magic. And we have to make sure that the bulk of the people in that time slot watch our show, right? So can we present goals that are minuscule? Can we present goals that are unimportant? No, when you walk into a cinema, if you have made a movie, is your placard the only one that's going to be there? There's going to be others alongside it, right? And the task is of the South Africans even harder. Because if your South African movie, your movie for a South African placard is there, chances are what's alongside it? Hollywood blockbusters. Does that make sense? Right? So what is going to make people, your audience, decide, I want to watch this instead of what we know is going to deliver what we want? Okay? So you guys need to live with that reality. Too often we present things that come to mind as, a first thought. Does that make sense? Right? And when we do that, we are playing in the space of mediocrity. Does that make sense? You guys have to learn to elevate yourselves because you're competing all the time. It's an art form, guys, but at the end of the day, it's a business. Someone is going to put money into your project because they want to get money out. So if your film doesn't perform, you suffer a loss. You reduce the chance of being able to make another one. Does that make sense? Okay? So let's take Fanta and make it interesting because right now, it's just a drink. What makes this important? There is cannabis. There's no cannabis in this one. Yes. No. Yes. It's the last Fanta on earth. So can you see? Suddenly I'm interested. Does that make sense? It's the last Fanta on earth. And if it's the last Fanta on earth, what is she likely? A collector. So it is important to her. Does that make sense? Can you see? Now it's not just a drink anymore. It's a collector's item. And it's the last of its kind. Are we making it more important? Are we applying our minds more? Good. Let's apply our minds further. What else could make the Fanta interesting? It's an antidote. Beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. So let's then go here, guys. Right? So what we've established now is that the first thing when you're a storyteller, right? See, this speaks about, what is it? What? Block? Creative block. Creative block doesn't exist if you approach story the right way. Creative block means you write story without knowing what your story is. Of course you'll get stuck. Does that make sense? All right? So the first thing is you have to know what you want. Does that make sense? A tin of Fanta, right? And then you have to know what stops your protagonist, because this is your protagonist. This is the person who the story is about. Does that make sense? What stops them from getting that Fanta, right? Then you introduce Loverboy. Does that make sense? Okay? And the thing about it is, it's a bit, I don't have a flip chart here because I would have written these things down. If you guys have pens and papers, write this stuff down. Okay? So the first thing is you have to want something. The second thing is what stops you from getting it. Does that make sense? Okay? I'm going to jump past the next point quickly just to make the next point, if that makes sense. All right. So in the pursuit of this tin of Fanta, right, you know who the obstacle is. What do we call the obstacle? We call the obstacle the antagonist. Does that make sense? Okay? Now listen carefully. What's the character name again? Dando. Okay. Listen carefully. What does Ntando stand to lose if she doesn't achieve her goal? Say that again. Why do I care about that? Okay, whoa, 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 whoa. Now we have to separate things because in one instance she's a collector, so this is the last of its kind. In the other permutation, this is an antidote. Does that make sense? Right? If she's going to lose her life, if this is the antidote, what is wrong with her? She's on? She's got COVID. Okay. So guys, here's another thing. Story requires you to be very specific. Does that make sense? Right? Now think about it carefully. If I'm at the beginning of COVID and I want an antidote, is my audience going to care? Because I'm still at full faculty. Does that make sense? An antidote becomes important when I'm on the brink of death. Because you're always elevating. You're always competing. Does that make sense? Okay, so if that's an antidote, what's wrong with her? Maybe? Beautiful. Okay. Okay. So can you see? This was a drink at first, right? But the thing is, tell you what, I'm going to discard antidote because this is not medicine. So that falls out. We can't use it, right? We have to elevate a sugary drink. We have to elevate a sugary drink. And I think under the circumstances that we've created now, even this being a collector's item, is kind of halfway there, but it's not fully there. Does that make sense? Right? So can you see how you have to challenge yourself all the time as a writer? Right? I was seduced by an antidote, and then I have to remind myself, it's a nice drink. It's not an antidote. So how do we elevate a nice drink? Yes? Okay. Right. Okay. So, guys, here's the thing. I asked the question again. We've established what she wants. She wants a tin of Fanta, right? We've established what stands against her. Ulava boy doesn't want her to get it for whatever reasons. He doesn't want her to get it for. What does she stand to lose if she doesn't get her hands on this drink? Yes? No, this is the goal. This is not the antagonist. Ntando is the protagonist. Antagonist, yeah.
So they come from these successful families, right?
No, I don't want scenarios, guys. I don't want stories. I don't want stories. I don't want stories. What does she stand to lose if she doesn't get this drink? Yes, Ntando, the protagonist of the story. We'll get the answer from you. What the hell is sleep paralysis? Okay. Guys, the only point that I'm trying to make, right, is that you constantly have to elevate. Even I had to think about it. Have you guys heard of something called hypoglycemia? What is hypoglycemia? It's when your blood sugar levels fall below a certain point. And when your blood sugar levels drop below a certain point, it is life-threatening. Your life is in danger. Does that make sense? What do you need in order to raise your blood sugar levels? You need sugar. What is in Fanta? Does that make sense? Right? Does that make sense? Right? So can you see? It's not about elevating for the sake of elevating. You have to elevate it in the context of the fact that this is a sugary drink. Those are the parameters that you set for yourself. Does that make sense? It can't be anything else. Does that make sense? Now, this is no longer just a sugary drink because if she's got hypoglycemia, her life depends on it, or her grandmother's life depends on it. Fanta has now become a matter of life or death. Have we elevated? Absolutely. Does that make sense? Right? So guys, don't be mediocre when you create story. Don't be mediocre when you create story. Does that make sense? Okay. So, to answer you, it's, look, what I didn't come here, what I didn't come here to do is just to stand here and talk. I wanted to interact with you, right? So my objective when I came in here is to get anything that's got sugar in it. Does that make sense? Chocolate, but does that make sense? And then I got a drink, and there was no Coke, there was only Fanta. But the principle is exactly the same. Okay? The principle is exactly the same. That's it. Okay? So what have we got at the moment? We've got you must want something. Does that make sense? And whatever you want, guys, has to be significant. Right? It has to be significant. So let me ask you guys a question. When you're watching a show, why are you engaged? Why are you engaged when you watch something? What's going to happen next? Do you know, I also didn't know the answer to this until someone said it. You watch because you care. Because you care. Yeah, yakata. You watch, it's as simple as that. And if you don't care, you will not watch. It's as simple as that. Does that make sense? Right? So if a protagonist is pursuing this purely because it's a sugary drink, I don't think we'll really care. As soon as we know she's got hypoglycemia and she needs a sugar rush, suddenly we might be interested. Does that make sense? Okay? So the goal has to be significant. The goal has to be something that makes you care. The goal has to be something that makes you question, oh my goodness, are they really going to achieve it or not because you understand it's important for them to get it. Does that make sense? Okay, right. So the first thing is, you have to understand, you have to determine specifically what your goal is. And guys, happiness is not a goal. Happiness is not a goal. Love is not a goal. Does that make sense? Right? What is it that physically represents love in your story? It could well be that it's a love story. You understand? That is your goal. So it has to be specific, it can never be broad. Right? Because if you're after love, if you're after happiness, those aren't goals, those are themes. A goal is practical. Does that make sense? A goal is practical. So for instance, I'll make an example. If we're watching a legal drama and two people are in court, right, and the lawyer wants to get a client off, what does the lawyer want? A lot of people say justice. No. They want to win this particular case. So you have to be specific. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So I jumped back and I'm going to come forward. So it's, what does Thando want? What stops her from getting it? But a very important question is, in fact, what stops her from getting it is the third question. First question is, what does she want? The second is, why does she want it? You guys have already answered that question. Why does she want it? Why does she want it? She wants to save her life. She wants to save her life. Does that make sense? What does she want? Why does she want it? What stops her from getting it? So we've covered those three so far, right? Okay. And then the fourth one is, what does she stand to lose if she doesn't get what she wants? And can you see that answer is very close related to why she wants it? Does that make sense? I wish I could write, but I can't. All right, it's fine. Okay, So, lover boy, go stand there again. Okay? And sondela man, ubese phakathi in the middle. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. So we very much dealt with the technical aspects of story, right? We want a goal. We have a goal. We have a reason why we want the goal. There's something standing in the way of us getting that goal. And we know what the risk is if we don't get our goal. It's life or death. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, the person pursuing this goal is not a cardboard, right? A character at the end of the day is also a human being. Does that make sense? Right? And unfortunately, the nature of a human being is that if Loverboy is the antagonist, do you think that's Ndando's only antagonist? What else is her antagonist? Why herself? If she doesn't have confidence, right? Okay? More answers, please. Why is she herself an antagonist? Yeah. Okay. So guys, as people, whether we like it or not, there are things that we battle with internally. Some of us are cowards. Some of us suffer anxiety. Some of us don't trust. Does that make sense? The list goes on and on and on and on. Does that make sense? Right? Those are the things that make us human. And they are called flaws. Does that make sense? Right? So if Ndando has a flaw, she's already battling internal demons. Is she going to overcome Loverboy while she's still harboring these internal demons? Does that make sense? Right? So what does she first have to do in order to defeat lovers? She has to conquer herself. Does that make sense? Guys, when you watch film, when you watch movies, is the character that you start with at the beginning the same as the character at the end? No. The process of story is a journey of transformation. Does that make sense? Right? So you always start out with a less than complete person, right? And you target the area in which they are incomplete. And the purpose of your story is to make them overcome that thing so that by the end they are complete. Does that make sense? So she will never beat lovers until she's confronted whatever it is within her that is a shortcoming. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. So the reason that that is important is, I said to you earlier, when you watch something, you have to care. You care immediately when you're watching another human being on screen. Right? Because that you can relate to, because an aspect of you is exactly like that person. Does that make sense? As soon as you watch someone with a shortcoming, you can emotionally attach because you're also at the same time dealing with your own stuff. Does that make sense? Okay? So let's go through those questions again. Guys, 45 minutes is not a lot of time, right? So the only thing, and I'll probably run out of time before I get to where I want to get anyway. Does that make sense? Okay? But hopefully I'll get through the first phase of what I need to get through. So the first question is, what does your protagonist want? Right? The second question is, who are they? What do you guys think that speaks to? In fact, first question is, what do they want? In brackets, write goal. In brackets, write goal. And then the second question is, who is your protagonist? In brackets, write flaw. What is the internal issue that they're dealing with? Does that make sense? And sometimes, though a flaw is second, you'll probably have to work out all the other stuff before you get to the flaw. I hope that doesn't confuse you. Okay? Who is your protagonist? The third question is, why do they want what they want? And that's motivation. A character that wants something that is not motivated, there's no story there. You can't just want something for the sake of wanting it. There must be an important reason that you do want it. Does that make sense? Okay. What number is that number? What do they want? Who are they? Why do they want it? Okay. What stands in the way of them getting it? Right? So can you see that's where we separate the external antagonist versus the internal antagonist. The internal antagonist is, who are they? Another way of phrasing the question is, what's wrong with them? That's their first antagonist, the inner one, right? As soon as you get to the question of what stands in the way of them achieving their goal, that's that external antagonist. Does that make sense? Okay? And then the last question is, what do they stand to lose if they don't achieve their goal? Those are called the stakes of the story. Does that make sense? Right? Do you guys know what stakes are? That's it. The stakes have to be high. That's it. That's it. And would you also, if you lose that case and the audience knows that the person that has been charged is innocent, it makes it even worse. Does that make sense? Because they're going to be wrongfully prosecuted. Does that make sense? Okay? So the thing about it is that we don't know that this is where story starts. These basic questions, right? And our nature, when we say we're writers, we're too busy wanting to write. You first have to figure out these things. Because if you don't figure out these things, you will get stuck. Does that make sense? Now, having answered all those questions for Nando, what is the next thing then that you have to do? And this is a mistake that a lot of writers make, okay? Because we are under the misconception that story is just about Undando. It's just about the protagonist. You then have to take all those questions and you have to answer them for lovers. Because he's not a cardboard. He's not two-dimensional. He's also a fully fledged character. Does that make sense? Right? Why does he want to stop her? Right? What does he want, in fact? Right? Does he just want to stop her, or does he also want the can? Does that make sense? If he wants the can also, and the thing about it, guys, what you have to understand, if the protagonist and the antagonist are not after the same thing, you don't have a story. If they're after separate things, you don't have a story. Right? They are bound by the same thing, by finding purpose and being after the same thing. Does that make sense? So if Lovers also wants the Coke for himself, or the Fanta for himself, sorry, right, you then have to ask, why does he want it? What stands in his way of getting it, which is Ndano. Does that make sense? And then you have to answer the question of, if he doesn't get that Fanta, what does he stand to lose? Does that make sense? Okay. So you have to answer the questions for both. If you start with answering the questions for the two primary characters, because the protagonist and the antagonist are your two primary characters in any telling, does that make sense? Right? You're halfway to knowing what your story is about. This is the difficult work, right? A lot of people either don't do this work. If they do it, they only do it for the protagonist, and they don't do it for the antagonist. Take it a step further and do it for the antagonist, right? Because if you don't do that work for the antagonist, what's going to happen when Siva comes along? Because she's a producer. She's going to start casting actors, right? And if she casts good actors, what is the question good actors are going to ask? Right? Can you tell me my character? And you've only done this work for Undando, which means that Ulavas doesn't have a character biography because you didn't ask those questions for his character. It's the answering of these questions, guys, that helps you derive your character biography for the character. Because then an actor is clear, oh, I want that. I know why I want it. Oh, okay, I understand Lovers is my antagonist already. Can you see? Before they even read the script, they have a clear idea of who their characters are. Does that make sense? Okay? Why did I ask for the youngest person in the room? Ask the youngest person in the room. Right. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? Right. Okay. Yeah. Lovers. Lovers was once in my class, so he knows the answers to all these questions. I just remembered. Okay. And why I specifically, intentionally said I'm looking for a brute of a man. Why did I ask for that? Yes. Right. Okay. Yes. No. 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 Guys, look, with every aspect of story, we're trying to make our story more interesting, right? We elevated a tin of Fanta, right, into something that had to do with life and death. So we're always elevating. That was one aspect. That was the goal. Does that make sense? In every aspect, we are elevating, right? Now, the thing about it is that if this was Jean-Claude Van Damme in his heyday, would getting the Coke be a problem even if Flowers was in the way? Wouldn't. Because she'd just karate kick him and she'd get the Fanta. Does that make sense? Right? So the dynamic between the protagonist and the antagonist has to always be David versus Goliath. Does that make sense? That's why I asked for the youngest person in the room. That's why I asked for a brute of a man. Does that make sense? Because when you look at the picture, what must the picture say to you? There is no way in hell she's going to get that Fanta. Does that make sense? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? Are you guys beginning to get this? Okay. Are you guys beginning to get this? Now, I'm going to take it one step further, and I hope I don't complicate this for you. What's Ntando's flaw? What is it that she has to defeat within herself before she's able to defeat Lovers? Self-doubt, good. Self-doubt, good. Say that again. Fear is good, but more often than not, you have to define fear. You have to be specific